The wealth effect is the part of the change in my behavior that's not due to the change in opportunity costs, but rather purely due to the change in the wealth that I've experienced. Thus, in order to identify the welfare effect, we need to see two parallel budget constraints. Two budget constraints where there's no difference in the opportunity costs, but a difference in wealth. We have these two budget constraints in the green compensated budget and the magenta final budget. The optimal bundle on the green compensated budget is bundle B, which therefore becomes our reference bundle as we think about what happens to behavior when wealth changes from the green budget constraint to the magenta budget constraint. As we said in graph 8.5, it's reasonable to assume that consumption both this summer and next summer are normal goods. Thus, as we move from the higher green budget to the lower magenta budget, we should expect to see a decrease in consumption both this summer and next summer relative to bundle B. We'll therefore restrict ourselves to this shaded region of the magenta budget constraint. If we now want to ask the question of whether you will borrow more or less when the interest rate goes up, we're really asking whether you will consume more or less next summer. If your consumption next summer goes up, that means you're borrowing less. If your consumption next summer goes down, it means you're borrowing more. Put differently, asking whether you'll borrow more or less is really asking whether you're moving above or below bundle A on your final budget constraint. In our graph, there's only a small region of the shaded part of the magenta budget constraint that lies below bundle A, where your future consumption falls, and thus your borrowing has increased as a result of an increase in the interest rate. The larger portion of the shaded area of the magenta budget constraint lies above bundle A, and therefore involves greater future consumption as the interest rate increases. In other words, it involves less borrowing. It turns out then that the question, will you borrow more or less as the interest rate increases, again does not have an unambiguous answer, not even when consumption both this summer and next summer are normal goods as we've assumed here. The substitution effect clearly says consume more in the future, in other words borrow less. The wealth effect, however, says the opposite, consume less in the future and therefore borrow more. Whether you end up borrowing less, as suggested by the substitution effect, or more, as suggested by the wealth effect, when consumption in the future is a normal good, then depends on which of the two effects is larger. The impact on your current consumption, however, is unambiguous. As the interest rate goes up, you end up consuming less now.